What's up YouTube, and welcome to the first ever episode of 5 Things Fridays. Just for some context, I plan to upload a short video every Friday discussing 5 things I think you should know centered around photo, film, and video. So this is the very first episode, and guess what? We actually have an intro. So here we go. The first 5 Things episode is dedicated to my current favorite camera, the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K. So the reason I'm making this video is for people that are looking into buying this, whether or not they're sure if this is the camera that they should be buying or not, or if they have already bought it and they are, trying to find out what accessories they should get for it, what's a good buy and what's not a good buy, because a lot of gearheads will try sometimes to tell you that you need to get this or you need to get that. I'm gonna cut through all that BS and tell you exactly what you need and what you don't need. So thing number 1 I wanna talk about is the camera and its lens mount itself. The camera is a micro four thirds mount, and honestly it's my very first micro four thirds camera I have ever owned. So at first, finding good native lenses for this camera was like pulling teeth for me, because before I was a Canon fanboy, so I was all team EF, and then I moved recently into Sony, got rid of all my Canon stuff, and so now I've started trying to build up a micro four thirds lens collection. So early on, I was sort of an early adopter of this camera, so there wasn't a whole lot of talk on the forums and stuff about what lenses you should get like there is now. But I will tell you, early on I discovered that on micro four thirds cameras, Canon FD lenses are like freaking magic. So I started investing in old vintage photography Canon lenses for this camera, and man, everything that you point an FD lens at on this camera gives you a super cinematic image, and you're gonna absolutely love it. And you can get these lenses for cheap. I'm talking about $30, $50. Some of the really good FD photo lenses you can get for 100 or 150 bucks. So that's an awesome way to go. And then also I have some of these third-party lenses like this Laowa lens here, which is a 17mm 1.7. The 7 Artisan super cheap, ultra cheap lens. You can watch this video here on it. Even some weird lenses like this Helios 44-2 lens, some Minolta, 35mm lenses. And I'm just converting these all to micro four thirds, via these dummy adapters from KNF Concepts or from Viltrox. And these dummy adapters aren't giving me any sort of electronic, communication between these lenses and the camera. So you're not gonna get any sort of autofocus or any sort of aperture control or anything like that. But I mean, honestly, if you're using this camera like a cinema camera, you're not gonna be worried about, autofocus, or you're not gonna be worried about, any kind of aperture control. All that's gonna be right here on your lens anyhow. So this is the way to go, especially for personal work, run and gun stuff, or even like documentary filmmaking. This is a solid choice right here, these type of lenses. So for paid work, you're gonna wanna invest in some other glass, whether you're going a higher end like Canon glass, or even native micro four thirds cine lenses are great. So I've used the Vajra lenses in the past, and I really like those. I'm currently using those on a short film I'm shooting. I've also used those on a music video that I just wrapped. And the reason you want to use lenses like that on production is that way, you have your follow focus gears already on there. You don't have to, mess with those zip tie type of gears or anything to put on these like older photography lenses. So it's easier to pull focus. They're easier for your AEC or your AD to read when they're looking at the lenses. And they're just all around, just the ergonomics of them are better, especially when you're trying to mount stuff like matte boxes to them, because, these old photography lenses, a lot of times you have to use step up and step down rings just to get a matte box on them. Those are already the right dimensions at 72, 77, or I believe maybe, 65mm. So they're already ready for stuff like that. They're more of an industry standard as opposed to trying to use all these adapters and stuff just to make all these accessories work with them. These are freaking magic. So if you're looking for affordable lenses, you can buy these all day long. All right, so the second thing I want to talk about is batteries. So the Pocket 4K comes with one of these LPE6 Canon batteries. You guys may remember these from the old Canon Rebel DSLRs. I think the 80D had this. That whole era of cameras had it. Maybe even the 5Ds. Some of the 5Ds had these. Those worked fine in those cameras, but in this camera, it's essentially trash. I have no idea why Blackmagic went with these, other than maybe just trying to save space in the battery compartment or something like that. But these, depending on the codecs that you're shooting with in the Pocket 4K, these aren't gonna get you very long. So you're gonna need to carry around 15 of these probably for a shoot day. And that's just really not feasible, in my opinion, having that many batteries or having these many batteries on hand that are this size. You're gonna lose them, they're gonna get in your way. It's just way too much to keep up with. But what I like to use is I like to use the MPF 970s, especially these beefy guys here. I can use one of these and shooting in a pretty low compressed codec, like a 3.1 or a 5.1 is what I like to shoot in. Blackmagic RAW, I can shoot on one of these for about 2.5 to 3 hours. So if I have about 4 of these, so that's gonna get me, you know, about 12 hours of shooting. And that pretty much for me is a full shoot day. So I just take, you know, 3 or 4 of these with me and I'm good. And then I have a couple smaller ones, like this one here, and this one here, that are about the size of the LPE 6 battery, except they're a little longer. But these they're slimmer, and I like to put them on the back side of my monitor because this also runs off MP 970. So these batteries are good, they're pretty affordable. A lot of people will tell you to get V-mounts and mount a big V-mount battery, but that's gonna make your whole setup heavier. It's not a bad way to go if you have it laying around, but it's gonna make your whole setup heavier. And to me, that's something that I would include in like a gear list for rental or something on a production, as opposed to just buying that myself, because good ones are pretty pricey, and to me, it's gonna make everything heavier when these guys do the same thing, you know, just as good. And these right here, you just connect up here, up top to a battery plate, and boom, you're good to go. You know, nice and light, nice and easy. Keep a couple in your bag, and you're good to roll. So the third thing I want to talk about is media, and this thing will chew through some media as well as it does batteries. So you can forget about CFast cards. To me, that media is just overpriced. It's outdated for what it is. A lot of people swear by them, but I don't care anything about CFast cards. I think they're garbage. SD cards aren't really fast enough in here. For me, the space isn't big enough. I mean, you can get, I think, a 1 terabyte card, but it's gonna cost you an arm and a leg. Like a 1 terabyte SD card is gonna cost you an arm and a leg. So the best and most popular thing for this camera is this right here. This is the Samsung Portable SSD T5. This right here is a 500 gig one. This will run you $90. I think you can get a 1 terabyte one for 150 bucks. If you get 1 or 2 of these, that's all you need for this camera. They're pretty rugged, they're fast, for the most part, they're reliable. So I've had this same one right here for a year. This is a 500 gig one. I've had this thing out in light rain. I've had it, you know, in my camera bag, in a camera case. I've shot music videos, films, you know, run and gun stuff, personal projects with it, and it's held up. It's never dropped a frame. I've never had any issues with it. And it just keeps going. You know, to me, I've heard people complain about these, but I've never had one issue out of this. And like I said, it's been in a case, it's traveled around, it's been bumped, it's been formatted time and time again, exported footage loaded onto it, and I haven't had any issues with it, knock on wood. But these are great. So just get you a couple of these. Don't worry about SD cards, or don't worry about CFast cards. This is what you need. Now, the only issue with something like this is, since it's an external drive, you're not gonna be able to put it inside the camera. So you're gonna have to buy a mount or some sort of holder for it to mount on the external parts of your camera, essentially, right? So that brings me to the next thing, and that's camera cages. So pretty much every camera I ever buy, I purchase a camera cage for. And what camera cages are good for is for protecting your camera from bumps, scratches, and potential falls. It's essentially metal armor for your camera. And this right here is the Smallrig half cage. And the reason I like this one for the Pocket 4K is because this will fit really nicely on a Ronin S. I'm not sure about other gimbals, but the Ronin S, it'll allow my Pocket 4K to balance really well on that without putting too much strain or stress from the motors. It allows me to bump my my Pocket 4K almost all the way up to the right side or the right arm of the Ronin S, and balance it nice and without overworking the motors or putting too much stress on the motors. And you know, I think it's important to have, you know, this half cage, and I also have a full cage. So full disclosure, this cage right here was sent to me by a company called Sutefoto. They hooked me up with it. They asked me, they said, hey, do you want to try out this cage? And I said, yeah, of course, you know, send it my way and I'll check it out. They didn't tell me to give it a positive review or nothing like that. So I'm not gonna BS you, but this cage is pretty awesome. And the reason I like this cage is it's $30 cheaper than its competitors, and it's made out of the exact same material as the Smallrig cage is. So in addition to a cage protecting your camera, it's also going to give you all of these crazy amount of mounting points. And the Sutefoto cage has exactly the same, if not more, mounting points than the Smallrig cages have. Because a lot of the Smallrig cages don't have them going down. They have this, I guess they call it NATO rail on the backside, as opposed to where this Smallrig cage has mounting points on like the back sides of the supports. So it may have more mounting points. Yeah, so this is a great cage. Like I said, it's about $30 cheaper than its competitors. Now the only issue with this one here is my Samsung SSD holder up top that I have with the Smallrig cage, I don't have on the Sutefoto cage, so I had to buy a phone holder, one of those springy ones, to put my T5 SSD in. But I mean, works just fine. You can wiggle that around all day. It ain't coming loose, and works fine. So I highly recommend getting this if you're getting just a full cage. It'll save you money, like I said, anywhere from $30 to $50 cheaper than its competitors, maybe even more compared to the Tilta. But honestly, that Tilta full cage looks good. But this one right here will save you a lot of money, and then it allows you to buy more of these guys right here, the MPF 970s, or even allows you to buy another Samsung SSD, or, you know, honestly, for $50, you can probably buy you a vintage lens. So it's up to you really, but I would say save money on the cage, buy something else or another accessory for your camera. This cage particular will be linked down below, as well as this one. And yeah, that leads me to thing number 5. So thing number 5, and the last thing I want to talk about, is display. So the display on this camera isn't bad, but when this camera first came out, a lot of people were complaining about this display. One, for its brightness, because it's only 500 nits, and also because it's not an articulating screen. So when this camera came out, at its price point, it's pretty affordable. I think it's like $1,300. A lot of people that don't just shoot, I guess, films were picking this camera up. People that were shooting stuff just for YouTube, people that are shooting everyday stuff like real estate and, you know, social media content were buying this. And they're used to coming from the DSLR world where they had, you know, articulating screen where they could self-monitor themselves and stuff like that. You know, to where they could do this number here, which is awesome, and that's fine, except for, you know, most of your cinema cameras aren't gonna come with an articulating screen. Now, the bigger issue is the screen being only 500 nits, because if you're shooting a daylight exterior, this is basically all washed out. You can't see what you're doing unless you get some sort of EVF or a sun hood, and at that point you're kind of, if you're putting an EVF on the back of here, then you're kind of not able to use the touch screen, or if you have like a gradical EVF, you're going to be spending like at least $1,000 on one of those. So it kind of just makes it all economically and ergonomically non-feasible. So the best thing you can do, honestly, is just get you an external monitor. And pretty much all cinema cameras that you ever see have an external monitor. I mean, a lot of you guys are probably used to seeing the Red with its big 7-inch or 5-inch articulating monitor on top. You know, this is no different. You're gonna need an external monitor just because the nits are usually brighter in these, and of course they articulate, right? So I can spin this monitor around 360 degrees or 90 degrees if I want. It doesn't, you know, I can move in any direction. I can turn it to the front, monitor myself, you know, from the front, and it's literally just on a mount in the cold shoe of the handle. And you know, like with this monitor here, if you're trying to get a low shot, you're screwed because you're gonna have to get close to the ground. If you're trying to get a grounded shot, it's just game over. It's not gonna work. With an external monitor, you just flip it down like this, hold it down low, look straight down at the monitor, and you're good to go, right? So you need an external monitor for this camera, but what I would say is I don't recommend this one. So this right here is the Atomos Ninja 5. I've had this monitor for a little while, but it is overpriced for this camera. It's just not a good pair for it. This is a $700 monitor, but this is really good for being an internal recorder for other cameras that don't shoot RAW internally. It will allow them to shoot RAW, or it will also allow them to shoot 10-bit internally. The Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K is capable of doing everything internally that this monitor is able to do. So really, I can only use this as a monitor on this camera. Now, this was great for the A6400, the A7 III, or any other cameras like that, but for this, it doesn't really offer any additional benefits. So I would go ahead and I would get something like the Portkeys, BM5, or something like the FILMMAKERS or the Andy Cine 4K monitor, which are a lot cheaper. But if you want a killer monitor to use on your mirrorless cameras also, then I guess this would be a good choice. You can rig out a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K for pretty cheap. These are just the 5 things that I think we should cover, and the 5 most important things that we should cover. If you guys have any questions, throw them down in the comments. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up because that helps me a lot. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you have any ideas for 5 Things Fridays, throw it in the comments, and I'll start picking out the comments for suggestions for 5 Things Fridays. But as always, guys, remember, just go shoot, and I'll catch you on the next one.